Hello, my name is Brent McBride. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. What I'm about to tell you is very creepy, eerie, and most people won't believe what I'm going to say. However, I've held this in for 23 years, except for closest family members and friends who have been witnesses to these experiences. It all started in 1989. On October 14th, I was working in a retail store. And in that retail store there was a wall of televisions on different stations. That day was really slow, and there was about 7 men in the department store gathered toward the middle. And I walked up on them, hearing them talk about prophecies and prophets, and I just listened. And all of a sudden, totally unexpectedly, out of my mouth, I said that there was an earthquake coming, and all you're going to see on all these TVs is coverage of it day and night on every channel, into the night. And this was October 14th. Well, 3 days later, the great San Francisco earthquake hit, which rattled Candlestick Park during the World Series. Many of you may remember that. I believe it was around a 7, somewhere in that neighborhood. But ever since that day, I started having premonitions about earthquakes and other things, but primarily earthquakes. I had one man come up to me that day in tears. Another man came to me, wanted me to go to the racetrack with him. So I wondered for several years why exactly that happened. Well, the kicker, if you will, to the whole story is that wasn't the earthquake I was speaking of. The earthquake I was speaking of was an earthquake I gained knowledge of earlier in 88, maybe early 89, that was going to be a cataclysmic earthquake on the North American continent. And so when I told them of this earthquake coming, that was actually the one I was speaking of when 3 days later the San Francisco quake hit. Well, to make a long story short, this has happened over and over and over again for 23 years. I will feel anxiety, ominous feelings. I will feel apprehensive about the future, and I can sense earthquakes. Not all earthquakes, but quite a few. And usually they always happen within 1 day to less than 5 days. I think one took 3 to 5 days. Before that great quake in the Sumatra, the 9.1 back in 2004, I was speaking to a family member on December 25th, Christmas, and telling him about it. And I was very, very upset, stirred up. I was very caught up in a ominous, powerful feeling when the next day that earthquake hit. One of the greatest earthquakes in the history of the world, recorded history anyway. Well, with that said, the experience that blew me away the most was in 1992. I was with a totally different group of people, and it was a mall setting, and in the mall they had a big screen television to try to attract the attention of people to come into the mall. Well, I worked at this store, and there were these 3 people, I know all their names. They were standing around television. Well, I came from another part of the store. I walked up. I was just listening to them talk. I wasn't paying any attention while I was on the television. I believe it was a game show or something, and they were talking about people who could see into the future. Psychics, people like that. And I wasn't going to say anything, but suddenly out of my mouth I turned to that big screen television, as it were a chalkboard or a map, and I said, well, I know two things that are coming in the future. I'm not a prophet, but I'm telling you two things I know are coming in the future. Well, I began to tell them about this great cataclysmic earthquake. And then I told them a second thing that was going to happen. Well, immediately one woman walked away and just in a dread of fear. Another guy believed me, and this other girl didn't know what to do with me, thought I was a little crazy. Well, I did no longer get those words, no sooner get those words out of my mouth, when suddenly, right across that television I'd been standing by and using, the words "a glimpse into the future" came right across the screen and just sat there for a moment. I looked at them and I said, look at that, and they looked, and it freaked us out. It freaked us all out. It freaked me out. It was like a Twilight Zone moment. It was just this moment you can't explain, and it was bizarre, creepy. Well, after that experience, I began to wonder, and again, I was speaking of this great earthquake to come that I had been talking about all these years. So I began to wonder, what do the scientists know about earthquakes? So I started doing some reading and some in-depth research for several years, getting acquainted with different names. And I have total respect for the scientists. However, I could not find a scientist with an explanation that would really satisfy me in what I saw coming. Because what I saw coming was an earthquake not going down the Sierra or the San Andreas fault line, but the San Andreas taking a new direction east into the Mojave Desert, east down the Sierra Nevada mountain range, going north and breaking east of Oregon and east of Washington, all the way up through Canada for hundreds of miles, which I'm not even sure how far. And I think that it would probably cover anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 miles of a geographical area when it splits. Well, you say that sounds impossible. It's cataclysmic, but I know it's coming. I have no doubt in my mind it's coming. I do not know yet when it's coming. I have a map. I have tried my best to show exactly where it's going to be. It is, again, taking the path of the Sierra Nevada mountains east of Oregon, Washington, through Canada. So I searched and searched. I heard scientists talking about different quakes, different fault lines, but nothing like this. Until something really sobered me and jarred me. And